France has launched a major operation, dispatching hundreds of troops 16,000 kilometers away to this tiny island in the South Pacific, after 6 people were killed in the worst violence the territory has seen in 30 years. Thousands of protesters have taken to the streets of New Caledonia to denounce a French parliamentary bill that would allow French residents to vote in elections, undermining the voice of the Indigenous Kanak people. New Caledonia, a small island east of Australia administered by France, is home to 270,000 people, including 41% Kanak and 24% of European origin. While long-term residents are eligible to vote, the reform would see recent arrivals or temporary residents, mostly French, added to the electorate. The move is seen by many Kanaks as a return to the island's colonial past, when French settlers were allowed to vote while Indigenous people were prohibited. The protests mark the latest controversy surrounding French influence in its former empire, after several African countries moved to cut cultural and military ties with France in recent years. But how has France's colonial legacy endured for so long around the world? In addition to New Caledonia, France administers 12 overseas territories across the Pacific, South America, and East Africa, and even lays claim to territory in Antarctica. The administration of the territories differs. Some are managed like mainland France, while others are semi-autonomous. New Caledonia is the only autonomous region, but France still controls the island's military, immigration, foreign policy, economy, and elections. New Caledonia is also the world's 3rd largest nickel producer, but the country has marked economic inequality along ethnic lines, with disadvantaged neighbourhoods mainly inhabited by Kanaks or Melanesians. New Caledonia's active Indigenous independence movement has sought to wrest control from Paris for several years. The last independence referendum was held in 2021, but was boycotted by many Indigenous groups who criticised the vote being held during traditional periods of mourning due to the COVID pandemic, which had disproportionately affected their communities, casting doubt over the accuracy of the results. Questions of Indigenous land rights have also plagued local communities, many of whom were displaced from their ancestral land that had been seized by European settlers. But New Caledonia remains important to France's geopolitical aspirations in the Indo-Pacific region, which seek to balance the power between China and the US, especially over Taiwan and the South China Sea, with the French maintaining a military and nuclear weapons base on the island. Aside from those directly administered by France, Paris still maintains influence in its former colonies across the world, particularly in Africa. French is still the official language of 21 countries in Africa, and the CFA franc is a currency used in 14 African states that is tied to the euro and the French treasury. This also gives France preferential treatment in trade deals and has facilitated French ownership of natural resources found in its former territories. The strong influence France maintains in the region is partly due to the form of colonial rule it practiced during the height of its empire, namely a direct and highly centralized rule. The primary aim of French colonialism was to create French citizens through assimilation, which eradicated local languages and cultures and uprooted traditional institutions. Representatives were sent from the colonies to the Chamber of Deputies, with the colonies considered an extension of France. This made the fight for independence in French colonies especially brutal, as the imperial core refused to rescind control to indigenous peoples. During the Algerian War of Independence, over 8,000 villages were destroyed and 2 million Algerians were relocated to concentration camps. Under the battle cry, "Algeria must stay French," senior generals oversaw systematic torture and mass rape of women and children. But Paris refused to even recognize the war until 1999 and has not apologized for its colonial policies. In recent years, France's ties to its former colonies have come under increased scrutiny, as a remnant of neo-colonialism and a tool of French hegemony abroad. After a wave of military coups swept across West Africa in 2022 and 2023, some states took the regime change as an opportunity to cut ties with France, with Burkina Faso and Niger evicting the French troops stationed in their territories. In March 2023, Mali sanctioned French state media and has since dropped French as the country's official language, officializing 13 other indigenous languages in its place. There are similar aspirations in New Caledonia, with pro-independence groups and multiple political parties advocating for the creation of a new nation that supporters call Kanaki. But as French reinforcements arrive to quell protests, is France's global influence waning?